Hello and welcome to today's webinar on coaching and mentoring for the next generation of OSH leaders. I'm Kelly Nicoll, President for the next 2 weeks of IOSH, and I'm really delighted to have you with us. So before we begin, a quick reminder that this is being recorded and the link will be shared afterwards. Please do use the Q&A box for any questions that you may have, and I will try and get through them. If you put them in the chat, there's a distinct possibility that I will miss them, but we'll try and get through as many of your questions that you guys have. So today's session is tailored specifically for early career OSH professionals and those stepping into their first or second leadership roles. Our aim is to provide you guys with practical coaching and mentoring insights, strengthen or learn how to strengthen your emotional intelligence, and share some proven strategies to help leadership skills, influence your safety cultures, and position yourself as a trusted advisor within your organizations. So I'm thrilled today to introduce our panel. So we have Steve Conway, who is an executive and leadership coach who's bringing his expert insights onto leadership development and coaching strategies. We have Desma, who is a committed member of the IOSH Future Leaders Steering Group, who's going to be sharing her experiences on navigating some early career challenges. And we have Jawad, also from the Future Leaders Steering Group, who will share some practical strategies for building influence and confidence. So before we start any of the wider panel conversations, Steve, let's start with some real basics. Sure. What do we mean by coaching?
Okay. Well, coaching is, if you think about it, it's really about helping others think more clearly, act more effectively, and learn to solve problems based on their own wisdom. It's not really about, it's not telling people what to do. It's not giving that person advice. It's really about the coach listening, asking really thoughtful and powerful questions, and then really helping the coachee or the client uncover their own insights and their own learning. And really, a good coaching experience brings out the best in the person who's getting coached. Well, I think also strengthening a sense of trust and accountability with people.
I think that's a really succinct, great way of looking at it. And just so that everybody's really clear, how does that differ from mentoring?
Yeah. So mentoring is less about, having that person kind of find their own answers. And it's really about, sharing the mentor sharing their experience, the lessons they've learned and their perspective. So it's really about as a mentor, what's worked for me, and I'm imparting that wisdom and knowledge onto you.
So it's usually that kind of that slightly more traditional kind of older and wiser and more experienced, and I will impart my wisdom and knowledge so that you don't make the same mistakes that I do, or you don't do this you do the things the right way because I've walked that path already.
Yeah.
Coaching is a bit more of like helping somebody figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, I'd say, coaching is more, egalitarian. As a coach, I'm not the expert. Like I'm not trying to tell you how to think or what to do. As a coach, my role is to really, ask you questions, frame what your goals are, ask you questions to get you to start thinking about really what's going to work for you in your context. Mentoring, is a little more, it's more hierarchical. There tends to be more of a power imbalance there because I'm the one holding that wisdom. I'm the wisdom holder, and I'm sharing it with you.
So as a coach, you don't even need to come from the same industry. So like Steve, although you do have a background in, safety, you don't need to have a background in safety in order to coach a safety professional. You could go somewhere completely different and, completely different industry and coach somebody from there.
Yeah, ideally. I mean, the idea with a coach, remember, the coach is not there to solve your problems. The coach is there to help you, through that kind of questioning process to get you thinking about how do I solve my own problems using what I already know. Now, sometimes the people being coached might prefer, that the person has a background, but that can also if the coach isn't careful, their own biases can start to come out in there, which isn't always very helpful. So yeah, if you have a good coach, a skilled coach, they don't necessarily have to be part of that industry.
Okay, that's really well. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So I've paused it because I've been a little busy over the last couple of years, but I am currently partway through a master's in executive coaching, and practicing coaching with people who have a completely different industry of which I know nothing. I find incredibly fascinating, because it's that kind of curiosity thing, isn't it? Of actually, and when you don't know anything about it, you're probably asking what sometimes would feel like quite simple or quite basic questions, but potentially enabling somebody to look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, because when I do coach people, if I coach people, with a similar who are have a similar kind of background that I come from, I find that my little voice in my head says, ooh, I know what they should do. I know what it's easier. It's far easier for that experience to turn more into a mentorship or a consulting type of process than just strictly a coaching process. So, and many times if you don't have that background, it allows your mind to not kind of pipe in and say, I know what they should do here.
It was interesting because Desmond, we were chatting, weren't we, when we were doing a bit of a run through for this session, and we were chatting about the difference between kind of mentoring and coaching, and I certainly felt my brain going, oh, I know the answer to this because I've been there and I've done that, and these are the things that worked for me. And Steve was actually really great at turning around and going, so if I reflect on what you're saying, these are the things that I'm pulling out, which was, so I was very much sat in that kind of mentoring kind of mode, trying to pull myself into coaching. And Steve was just really nice and easy into that kind of coaching mode, which was really lovely. And then we all got cut off for some strange unknown reason.
Which will not happen today.
Which will not happen today, hopefully. Yeah. So reflecting on what you've just said, Steve, that kind of being able to put your own knowledge, your own experience, and your own kind of, oh, I know what they should do, bit requires quite a lot of work, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can be very hard. It can, self-awareness is really important, because as soon as my own internal, my biases, my own internal voice, which thinks it knows everything. It really does. My internal voice it's a Nobel laureate, but it's not always right. As soon as that part starts to come to the forefront, then I'm not actually coaching anymore. And I think that's why coaching it's a very interesting experience if you've ever had it, because a good coach isn't going to tell you what to do. Even if you ask them, they're not going to tell you what to do.
And that takes a certain level of like emotional intelligence, doesn't it? To kind of remove your own ego and your own knowledge from something, and kind of essentially I say just like it's a really easy thing to do, but just hold a mirror up to somebody and ask them questions to pull that answer out. Like that takes a certain level of like self-reflection and work and emotional intelligence, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. Because emotional intelligence, it's one of those, it's a set of competencies, and what I believe, can and should be developed for all leaders. And I think, in leaders, there's a case to be made that, really effective leaders are good coaching. But we also want to be mindful not to throw out, the value of mentorship, because that does play a critical role. But and emotional intelligence also plays a role in that as well. But really, emotional intelligence is, being aware of, your own emotions, your own, really what makes you tick, but also being aware of those in others and managing both of those with skill, right? And we do and that skill set really comes to the forefront when we're under pressure. It helps us read a room or read the individual that we're talking to, and it allows us to be, more reflective than reactive. And so in coaching, it can be it's an essential skill set, because it allows you, if you work on developing, and it does take work to develop it. I mean, when I talk about emotional intelligence, I say, I use terms like I'm a work in progress, right? but it allows you to better able to listen more deeply and, again, create that safe space for honest conversation, because without your own reactions interfering.
I can see Desma kind of itching to get involved. So,
yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for that. When you were speaking about emotional intelligence, I was really resonating with you. It has been like a very key part in my own growth journey. When I first stepped into a leadership role, I found myself in situations where I had to balance authority and empathy, especially when addressing, like in my role as a health and safety manager, concerns, just addressing concerns on site. For example, I had to coach technicians who repeatedly ignored PPE requirements. My first instinct was, most of the time, was frustration. Like, why will someone not wear a PPE? But I quickly realized that I approach the situations, I should approach the situation with empathy by shifting the narrative, asking why instead of why not. Something as simple as that. I could understand the challenges better, the reason why they were doing what they were doing. And I kid you not, it turned out to be an issue of discomfort with the gear, and they weren't just being defiance. So that experience taught me that emotional intelligence is about having curiosity and compassion, and not just having the control over people. So, okay, building on that, from your experience, and I know many early career professionals struggle with this, especially women. Being a woman, we tend to be really emotional beings. How can we manage our emotions and maintain professionalism when our authority is being challenged or dismissed?
Kelly, Kelly, you did give Kelly was part of a panel discussion just last week, which was fantastic. And Kelly, I think you can respond to this one very well.
So, I hit 40 earlier this year, and something switched in my brain, in as much that I am no longer apologizing for being an emotional human being. Like, it is part of who I am. I very much remember the pressure to swallow that part of me. And, I've sat in meetings before where I've gone, well, I've come into a business, and these are the things that I think are missing. These are the gaps that I think you've got. This is the way that I think that you can fix them. I'm newly qualified. I'm really keen. I'm really eager. This is really, really exciting. And I remember the CEO looking at me and literally going, like, he dismissed everything that I'd said, like literally went bat, 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 bat. And then as I'm getting up to leave, because I can feel it, I could feel the heat. I could feel the emotion kind of coming up. And it's that because we'd obviously not communicated effectively. And he turned around and he went, yeah, do you know what? I expected better from you. And I left because I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk. And I went and I saw, like, I went and had a little cry in the toilet, because I think that's perfectly valid. And, it happens. And I sent him an email later on and said, I've taken note of what you've said. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've taken note of what you've said and reflecting on it. Let's grab a coffee. So let's not do it in a meeting. Let's grab a coffee. And my first question to him was, well, if I'm not meeting your expectations, what are your expectations? And he was actually taken aback by that, because he didn't expect that level of kind of, okay, I'm going to go and challenge it. I'm going to go and have my emotional outburst. I'm going to have my little emotional moment, and I'm going to feel it. And then I'm going to go and try and figure it out. And that's very uncomfortable. That was very uncomfortable as a woman in her late 20s who had been in this industry for only kind of 5 or 6 years, had walked into a business that completely different industry, knew very little about it. And essentially his response was, because actually the reason that he said that to me was to provoke a reaction. Now that's not the greatest example of leadership I've ever seen in my entire life. But he wanted to see how I would react, and he was taken aback by the fact that I went and had my emotional moment somewhere else, pulled myself back together and went, okay, well, so what were you expecting? And I think as you get a little bit older and a little bit more experienced, and a little bit harder, a little bit more wiser, you're able to turn around and say that quite quickly, and you're able to remove that. He wasn't insulting me. He was actually insulting my profession as a whole, because he didn't see the point in having a health and safety person, and not, like, there was a whole heap of other stuff going on for him. And actually I think recognizing that actually as much as I've got going on, as much as Desma you've got going on, as much as Steve's got going on. I mean, Steve was on a plane like most of the night. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's like, as much as all of us have got going on, we're here, we're turning up, and we're doing something to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And that actually sometimes the way things come out and is not about you, it's about the individual an awful lot more. There's that Walt Whitman quote that I use all the time now, which is also Ted Lasso quote, because if you haven't seen Ted Lasso and you want a great example of coaching and coaching skills, that is like, it's brilliant. Really highly recommend it. That is just heartwarming and wonderful and toasty and just lovely. But it's curiosity over judgment. So my initial reaction to that was judgment. He's horrible. He hates me, and all of that kind of stuff. Managed to calm that and switch that part of myself off, and then came back with curiosity. And the more you do that, it sounds really awful. It sounds like I've had that all the way through my career, but the more you're able to come at it from, remove your ego and come at it with curiosity. So what is it that you meant by that? What did you mean when you said that? It's about me learning. Does that make sense? See, and now I've just ruined it all by then just going, oh, does that make sense? Because of course it makes sense. It makes sense to me anyway.
Well, and and I think the thing about emotions are, we disregard them at our peril, because our emotions give us probably the most accurate information about what's going on in the emotion. So we have to listen to those. We have to pay attention. And I think there's a growing understanding that emotion, we cannot leave our emotions at the door. We're emotional beings, and they come with us, right? So and Kelly, what you're talking about is probably the surest sign that you were in a psychologically unsafe environment with a psychologically unsafe leader, right? So I would say, Desmond, don't treat your emotions like there's something to, remove and cut off. Use information, because they tell you things, right? And I think we run the risk of buying into that idea that the only way to be successful is to kind of cut that part off. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work.
I mean, it can't. Like, it can't work. Because then what happens is you end up, when you suppress your emotions, you become unwell. Like, you really, like, I've done it before. I see my sister do it all the time. My sister is a consultant. She works for the NHS. Her job is hard. She deals with very unwell patients all of the time. She can't show any of that emotion at work. But what happens is it comes out when she's at home. And it's directed at people that it's not meant for, and that's really difficult. That can be really, really difficult to sit and watch.
Yeah, and it is hard, because we have these emotions, and I think at times we also have to remember, where we are. So there's the experiencing part, but when I'm having these emotions, am I reflecting on them, or am I, if I'm having a bad day, had a long flight, not doing well. My spouse is with me. I'm getting ready to do this. Things aren't working out, and I get snappy, right? Yeah, that's me having an emotion. But is that how I want to be playing that emotion out, right? So it's about how do I manage the reactions? How do I manage the impulses so that, they can come out in constructive ways? But it's certainly not about saying you're too emotional, you shouldn't feel anything, right?
Yeah.
You should feel things because it's vital information.
So I suppose that kind of feeds in quite nicely with that kind of how we do check it. Do you know what I mean? I think so. What I do sometimes now is if I'm in a meeting and I don't feel like I'm being heard, or something is going on for me that is going to create an emotional response, I name it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll sit in the meeting and go, do you know what, guys, I'm feeling quite frustrated, and this is why. And what that does, it allows it's like a pressure cooker. It allows it to vent a little bit because I've named it, I've explained it from an emotional perspective, and also this is what's going on for me. And it means that because I get wet anger, there's a dry anger and there's a wet anger. Dry anger is that really kind of hard, cold, cutting. Wet anger is I'm crying.
Right.
And I'm a crier. If I'm happy, I'm crying. If I'm if I'm angry, I'm crying. And I'm crying because I'm crying. Like, really, it's so annoying. I wish I could learn how to have that really cold, hot, dry anger. But by naming it, by recognizing it in myself and naming it early on, it reduces the risk of that happening for me. And then, do you know what? Yeah, there are days where I go, yeah, I'm feeling frustrated, and then the voice goes wobbly, and I notice it, and it just is. But that is more difficult to deal with as a woman than a man, and it's so frustrating. Like, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I can't remember a time someone has ever said to me, "Steve, you're being too emotional." Right? I can't. And even probably in situations where, particularly when I was younger, I could be, a little bit of a hothead in trying to express my point. Emotional intelligence was not a skill set of mine when I was younger. It was reacting. But even when I was reacting, no one ever said you're being emotional, even though that's exactly what I was being. So there's an inherent double standard.
It's because we don't recognize anger, particularly I'm being very generalist, but we generally don't recognize anger in men as an emotion.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. So is there something like, Jawad, how are things with you? Is there anything, like, does that resonate with you as a conversation? Have there been times where, like, keeping your emotions in check have been quite difficult? What's that been like?
Thank you, Kelly and Steve, for sharing this insightful conversation. So basically, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's the foundation of effective coaching and mentoring. So it's a basis. So basically, it's all about self-awareness and empathy, and the ability to manage your emotions or control your emotions. So in my coaching experience or work that I have done recently, I have seen so much changes in the emotion. Like, when we are dealing with the people, we should know how to deal with them and how to be very composed under pressure. For example, as safety leaders, we are facing a lot of challenges on daily basis. So we go through, like, for example, if an incident has happened, so we have to handle it like in a way that our mind should be focused, and we should not be losing our mind. So it's very important that emotional intelligence and controlling our emotions during these hard times and difficult situations like the incidents and all. So as a new professional or a leader which has recently, I will just advise people to just learn how to control your mind basically in these difficult situations. So I think I can ask Steve that how these early professions can help can deal with these situations where they are facing so much difficult situations. So how they can deal with this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and Kelly, hit on it earlier, but so often, curiosity will get you there, right? Curiosity is the antidote to judgment. And when I'm reacting to things, when I'm having a defensive moment, when I'm feeling challenged, usually I'm having judgments. I'm telling myself things about that. And so if I just kind of stop the judgment, my internal dialogue, and just be curious, right? Curiosity will get you there. Staying calm. And it sounds like, I don't want to contradict the importance of emotions, but we also, as part of emotional intelligence, it's also how do I manage those in a constructive way? How do I read that room? How do I show empathy? And I can't show a lot of empathy when I'm allowing my stress levels to go up, because the higher your level of stress, empathy literally drops off a cliff, right? So calm is really important. This sounds so obvious, but the art of breathing really comes in handy. Just stopping and taking a breath. When you're doing it, what might feel like an eternity is probably not even being registered by that other person. Just by get that breath, you start to calm down. It's important that you're not rushing to defend or correct, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to do that, right? It's when these things happen, again, that curiosity about it allows me to be really kind of laser focus on trying to understand what's behind that person's concern, right? Really trying to get it. It's about, even if you don't, you can hear things. You don't even if you don't agree, it's acknowledging that you've heard it, right? That shows respect. And all these kind of behaviors, when the tension's high, the more respect I show, the more I stay calm, the more I'm being curious rather than judgmental, the more my language is steady and clear. And when it's evident that I want to find a solution rather than win an argument, then the tension in the room goes down, right? And it allows that other person who might be feeling, they might be dysregulated themselves. So one of us has to do something with that. So if I'm the people leader, I've got to make that choice. Am I a people leader? Yes or no? Then if the answer is yes, then I'm going to make it my responsibility to be the first one to calm down, right? And then usually in my experience, other people typically follow suit. So calm, curious, and patient, I think is what I would recommend.
Just to re-emphasize, telling people to calm down does not help. Never, like in the history of ever telling somebody to calm down, I don't think it's ever helped.
On the fire. It's like, here you go. Here's a lit stick of dynamite. Yeah. Hold on to it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is, and I think that health and safety professionals are relevant of what level you are in your career. You are people leaders. Our job is to help everybody else get home at the end of every day of work. And that is about looking after people. You can be right at the beginning of your career of just learning what a risk assessment is, or just learning the legislation in your country. But these skills are the skills that will carry you so much further and so much quicker. Yeah. Because it's true. We promote people because they're technically good a lot of the time. We don't necessarily promote people because they are good at managing people. And that is a whole separate, different level of skills. And for our role, like Desmond, let's go back to the example that you shared of if you'd gone in and gone, you aren't wearing your PPE, what is going on? I'm going to discipline all of you. Mm-hmm. That would have had a completely different reaction. Whereas taking that, what you did was you took that, you were emotionally intelligent enough to take that breath, come at it from a curious perspective, and then found out that actually it had nothing to do with their willingness to wear it. It had everything to do with the fact that it wasn't comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you can fix that. And that then leads us really nicely into our next section, which is around things like that build your credibility, being able to be emotionally intelligent and take that step back and calm a situation down before, and then fix something because you're hearing what's going on underneath that builds your credibility and your trust so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. If when I think back, one of the reasons I'm part of this panel is because I represent the older group now. And again, it's really weird. When you get there, you won't believe it happened to you. You're going to think, how did I get to be the old person? If you're lucky, it will. But I think back about my early days when I became a young leader. And again, I didn't know how to be a leader. I got the job, but I didn't know how to be a leader. And I remember, I was in charge of people who were sometimes 20, 30 years older than I was, who had decades of not just, work experience, but lived experience that I couldn't match. And I remember, I went in there, not necessarily like a bull in a china shop, but pretty darn certain I knew what the best thing to do was. And that backfired every single time. And, I had to learn to really listen. And I think, the other, listening because there's, they have experience, they have wisdom. But I think for now that I'm one of the older ones, I can reflect back, and there's also a level of, now that I'm at this age, when a younger person comes in, for me, it also represents some loss. I've lost something. I've lost some stature. I worry that my opinions don't matter anymore, that they're not going to be listened to. And so whenever I, work with somebody who's younger, the most effective young leaders I see and I watch are exceptionally good listeners. And you can tell they're listening because they come back with well-timed, validation, with really curious questions that tell me they're listening. And that if I want to see somebody as credible, it's that skill. Actually, there's a model that I really like called the Francis Frey Triangle of Trust. And for leaders, there's 3 points of that. Trust is essential in a leadership. The first one is logic or your competency. If you don't know the technical aspects of your job, you're not going to be trusted. But that's what too many of us rely on. Another part of that triangle is authenticity. Doing what you say you do, being clear in your values, right? Being a straight shooter, as they call it. And that third part is empathy, right? And we all kind of wobble in some areas, but it's really the authenticity and the empathy that derails us when we're being in a leadership role, because we're not listening and we're not being authentic to our values. And people detect that. So just that the power of curiosity and listening, it is like a superpower. You do need to know your stuff, but that won't get you there alone.
Jared, what questions have you got for us?
Yeah, so basically, when we talk about becoming a trusted advisor, so basically, it's all about providing the answers. It's all about trust. So we have to build that trust first of all. So as OHS professionals, especially early in our careers, we often face a challenge of earning credibility in a well-established team. So for example, the team is already there and we need to build our credibility, and we are a new member of the team. So becoming a trusted advisor means showing the consistency, listening actively, and leading with emotional intelligence. So Steve, from your experience, what are some practical ways young HSE professionals can build trust with senior colleagues and contractors who may be resistant for the change?
Okay, good question. I think the first, they're not in any particular order, but be prepared. If you're going to go into a conversation, go into that conversation prepared, because you will look credible. If you make a commitment, follow through on it. Be the person who follows through. Be the person who makes sure that thing is getting done. And again, really important. And I talked about that trust triangle. Know your material. because that gives you credibility. But I think it's also really important if you don't know something, and this is really hard. If you don't know something, admit it and find out. And that is still something that I still struggle with that, you know, this idea that I'm supposed to know everything. So when I don't, and let's face it, there's a lot I don't know, but that confidence to say, you know what, I don't know, let me find out. That kind of, you might be telling yourself that, oh, I'm just undermined myself, but that kind of honesty, that shows integrity, and people will respect that. So that's a huge thing. Obviously, you know, respecting other people's experience, even if you're in that position of authority. That's something that I had to learn, right? They have experience, and listen to that and respect it, because there are things that they know that they just know through years of time. That's just the way it is. But you know, and it's a long game, right? Your like Kelly mentioned this the other day, you know, health and safety profession, it's a relational role. And we know that trust takes time. So give yourself that time to build that credibility, because it will grow from being consistent. You will grow by being, you know, that person who said, you know, this person always listens. They're always curious. They always follow through. That's what's going to earn that credibility and trust, right? So again, it's not a sprint, right? It's that you pace it. It's a bit of a marathon.
I think as well, so Catherine commented this idea around understanding personality types and communication preferences. And that, you know, we could, Steve and I could run a whole separate webinar just on kind of Myers-Briggs and all, you know, and all of those different bits and pieces. I think what's important is to recognize how people process information. So I'm an extrovert processor. I need to process things externally. So there are times where I will sit with my coach or my mentor, and go, I just want to talk this through. Like, I'm not necessarily like, I need to process this. That really annoys an introverted thinker. So somebody who sits and processes the information internally and then comes out with their thought process. And if you don't understand that about each other, it can be really annoying. It can be really frustrating. And you'll recognize it. Like Steve definitely feels like an extroverted processor to me, because we've hit it off in a way that is like, oh, like recognizes like, and I think we've kind of done that. Desma, like in the conversations that we've had, when Steve and I have asked you a question, it's not necessarily because the question's hard. It's just you are very much I'm going to sit back and I'm going to do that thought process internally and then respond.
Yeah.
And for some people, that silence is really difficult. So getting comfortable with that silence, like knowing that, being able to work that out about people without necessarily having to go, you know, you can pick that up about people quite quickly, and then enabling people to have that space to think in whichever way that they do it.
You know, Kelly, this reminds me of some more leadership advice I got. Right. You know, I had an employee that I was, you know, not gelling very well with, you know, and I was talking to the HR director about it, you know, and she said, well, Steve, you know, as a leader, your job is to adapt to their personality styles, not have everybody adapt to yours.
Yeah.
And that was a very, you know, that I had to think about that one. And it turned out that it was absolutely right. You know, we all know that there's all these leadership styles, right? And if you're like, you know, a transformational leader, you're going to think that's the best one, right? If you're whatever style, you are going to think it is the best style, you know, and we all have kind of a leadership flavor. But the best leadership style that you can ever have is being the self-aware leader. And that is, you know, the person that I am leading is, as Kelly was saying, if they are more extroverted, they are going to require me to take a different approach with them than somebody is more introverted. If I have somebody who's, maybe neurodivergent, for example, that's going to require me to adapt my style so that I can most effectively lead that person. Now, the trick is doing that with authenticity, right? And, being consistent in what your values are, but while being able to, shift your style so that it meets the needs of the person that you're leading. But so that requires, again, that's where that emotional intelligence comes in as well, because I got to know who I am and be true to that, be open to learn as well. But I have to be able to read the room, read the people around me, and adapt to that, because that will make you far more effective. Because we've all probably had those conversations where you've said something, you've given direction to somebody, and they're nodding their head. They're doing this, right? And and if you think that means that they're agreeing and they're going to do it, that's a very dangerous thing to assume.
Yeah.
Because that can mean a number of things. It could mean, yes, I do understand and agree. It could mean, stop talking now, I don't want to hear your voice anymore. It could mean, I'm so bewildered and confused, right? So the more we learn to pay attention and listen and adapt, the better we'll do. And that's where I think, coaching skills come in handy, because it can help you ask more clarifying questions to make sure, am I getting through? Are we connecting where we need to?
Yeah, I think that
maybe
go for it, Desma. Don't apologize. Go for it.
Go for it.
Okay. As I was listening to you guys speak, you're talking about consistency and all that. And what has worked for me has been spending time on site with teams, with frontline workers. Sometimes being a young professional, you got in this leadership position, you feel like you need to stay in the office and look at reports and write reports. And that does not work. And just people will not trust you. When you go to the site, sort the frustration on site, no matter how small the issue has been. That has helped me gain that credibility. And I had mentioned to you in our rehearsal session that I've gotten into a new role, and I'm trying to just get in and show I can maybe fix problems and be the occupational health and safety manager that they need. And maybe a question to maybe Kelly or Steve are what strategy will help me assert that authority without appearing overconfident or maybe disrespectful to some people? And another question, how can I earn respect as a new professional in a well-established team? The team that I've joined is well-established according to my judgment. So how can I earn respect from them?
I think that they're both really interesting questions, and I'm going to put a bit of a mentoring hat on rather than a coaching hat for this, because I've absolutely been there, done that, and worn the t-shirt and all of that kind of stuff. I think asserting authority without coming across as kind of overconfident or disrespectful is often a fine balance, and sometimes what other people think about us is not actually our business. So I had a very, very direct conversation with a number of people who were not performing, and and I called them out on it. I did not raise my voice. I was not rude. I was not disrespectful. I was assertive. I said that it wasn't acceptable anymore, and that perhaps what they needed to do was take a moment to reflect on whether this was something that they were actually able to commit to. The feedback that I got afterwards was that I was aggressive, which I was not, that I was rude and disrespectful. And actually, I know that I wasn't. I know that that wasn't the intention. And I was very, very careful about picking my words and my tone. And actually what I did was I sat and reflected on that. I sat and spoke to other people that were in the room and said, is that how it came across for you? I asked myself some coaching questions, and I went and did a bit of reflection and realized that actually that had more to do with the individual who was very uncomfortable about being called out on their lack of productivity than it did actually on me. I think when you are starting out, It's about knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we don't know what we don't know. And Rex has actually asked a question, which I'm going to bring in now, which is if I need to have an answer right now, but I don't actually know it, how do I do that? How do I manage that? Yeah. And I think if it is on the shop floor and it is something that you do not know how to do, I think the best thing for everybody is to go, let's stop. Let's just pause. Because you're asking me something that I don't know.
Yeah.
So let's stop. Let us, me and you, let's go and figure it out.
Yeah. It's the safest approach.
Yeah. By far the safest approach. And we have all of these. We all have computers. We were literally joking about it earlier. We all have computers in our hands. Do not necessarily use AI, because AI has a habit of lying to you. When it can't find the legislation, it makes it up. But, go and do a quick Google. What's the legislation? What's my ACOP? What's my best practice within this section?
Yeah.
And then, sit with somebody and let's figure out how we apply it. And that does not have to take long. When you're joining a team that is already really well established, learn people one-on-one and then their role within the team as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think that's, Desma, it's a challenge. But it's one that, so many leaders, are exposed to. So, it's been kind of alluded to already, but observe before you act. I can only speak for myself, but I've felt that pressure to go in early, make a statement, be noticed. And it never, in my personal experience, for some people it worked, but for me, it never worked that well. Because there's, even if I go in and I see things that I think, why is it like that? My first instinct, I need to change it. My better instinct is to, let me talk to people about why it's like this. What's the history behind this? Because often we find out such interesting things about why it is. The solutions could lie in that, rather than, going in there, trying to change the world. So, and I agree with Kelly. It's, trust is based on relationship.
Yeah.
Go in, have coffee with somebody, sit with somebody in the cafeteria or the lunchroom, ask them about their experience, get to know them on a human level, because that builds trust. So it helps you build understanding, and, it allows them to see you maybe as not a threat, as somebody who can add value to them. So you add value to each other. And what you're doing is you're building a team, right? A team of stakeholders who want to move forward. But nobody ever moves with anybody unless you trust them, right? So trust is essential. And it also, that respect also grows when they see that you being curious, when they see you being consistent, when they see you being, taking the time to get to know people. That's where it comes from. And so even a well-established team can be, they can absorb you into it if you do the right thing. But if you come in there like too strong and don't listen, there will almost be an immune reaction to shut you out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about reaching hearts and mind of people. So definitely it's very important, to learn how to communicate effectively, and how to basically, the area where I come from in the UAE, we are dealing with multicultural people, or with a different background, different languages, different values. So I just have a question, like, what coaching techniques do you recommend for a professional working in a multicultural environments, who need to communicate effectively while maintaining the respect and the inclusion? Yeah, so it's very important to maintain that. Yeah. So Steve.
Yeah, I think coaching is not a superpower per se, right? It does take effort. It does take. But I think one of the things about coaching, which is really important, is you're non-agended. in a way. Your agenda is to help that person, define what their goal is, right? Define what their reality is, define what the options are available to them, and help them define what they'll do with that, right? And and that's sometimes why coaching is very helpful. That's why, but sometimes that's why mentoring is needed, and sometimes that's why just directing is required, right? Because sometimes we do have to direct. But if we're talking purely about those coaching skills, it is really about that curiosity. And I think we've kind of, there's a theme here. It's curiosity. Don't be judgmental, right? Listen. And and you mentioned in your before, kind of winning the hearts and minds. It's recognizing that I might know some things, but you know some things. And how do I help you figure out the things that you know? And so if you have a team of people from anywhere in the world, they are going to know things. They are going to be able to contribute things. And your job is to help that knowledge come to the surface.
I think as well, like in kind of in exceptionally diverse places like UAE, where I mean it's something like Dubai is something. I know Dubai and UAE are different, but like in Dubai, for example, I think it's 90% of people are not from Dubai, which I find fascinating.
Yeah,
like such a melting pot and such a what is potentially huge clashes of cultures and huge clashes of different priorities and what different migrant workers require from and their experience of health and safety and their experience of what is priority and what isn't. Like it is part of our role to make sure that everybody understands and everybody gets it to the same level. And that comes from asking those kind of really open and non-judgmental questions, but also being very comfortable with turning around and going, like, I can do that to a point, but actually not quite turning into a parent. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a balance that we all have to find, that you put your harness on because I told you to, because I said so, is not necessarily going to engage a really positive safety culture. But at the same time, sometimes it's do that right, do it now, and we'll have the conversation afterwards.
Yeah.
Because right now is not the appropriate time, but let's get it done, and then we can go and have the conversation afterwards. Yes. And knowing that balance and knowing that, I mean, it's...
It takes time to learn it, because I think what we're talking about is, it's that blending of relationship, which is key, but with accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Because as leaders, as safety leaders, there's still an accountability to ensure that people are safe, to ensure that people go home. So that requires, and sometimes that there will have to be a moment of being direct, of providing that direction, which is not really negotiable in that moment, because when safety is at stake, you don't negotiate with that. Yeah. But then what? But that happened. But that doing that comes much more easily if you've invested the groundwork in ahead of time to develop those relationships. Because if I trust somebody and they come and they're telling me you need to do that, I'll do it more readily, and we'll have a better conversation, and it's that authenticity piece as well, right? They're doing it for my well-being. But I would only know that if that person had developed that trust. Yeah. Right. So it's all about is that relationship and accountability. We have to think about it in that way.
So we have about 6 minutes left. That has absolutely flown by.
Let's just keep it going.
We can just keep it going. So we've had a really fascinating question come in, which is a little bit outside of our somebody's asked, what do you do when the management aren't really into safety, even after constant persuasion? Is that something that, Desmond Jawad, you've experienced?
Yeah, so it can happen, but not in my experience. Maybe Despa can share something on it. That
has definitely happened to me, and I've been in situations where maybe I pose an initiative to them and they are quite reluctant to take in the message. And what I've done, and maybe you can guide me into doing it better, is speaking their language. If it's field technicians, I come in with the language of touching their well-being and their family. Work safe, go home safe. That has touched them and their families. And then when it comes to talking to the management, I talk about how this may help or maybe affect the reputation of the company, either positively or negatively. Just speaking about the business, how it will benefit the business, the productivity. Basically, speaking the language of my audience has helped with that.
I think that's entirely fair. And I think, I've certainly had the experience where I've got leadership teams who are not interested and have told me to my face, we are not interested. You are here to tick a box. And initially, I think my initial instinct, and had we been having this conversation kind of 5, maybe 10 years ago, my response would be go find somewhere else. Like actually go find somewhere that will appreciate you and recognize the work that you do. Now my argument is those are the people, those are the leadership teams who need you the most. And it is harder. It is so much harder, but it is so much more rewarding when you get that, when you finally see the light bulb go on and you see them start to get it. But that takes a lot of resilience, a lot of emotional intelligence, and a lot of and big shoulders to be able to go, I'm going to take it, because the perception of who we are as a profession has changed. It has to change. We are technical, we are knowledgeable, but we bring all of these other skills with us. If we're doing it right, if we're learning our coaching skills, if we're getting comfortable with mentoring and sharing our knowledge and doing it in a really non-judgmental and curious way, has been absolutely the theme of this. I think that is absolutely the key. And go and have those one-on-one conversations with those leaders and go, well, what is it? What is it? Well, you cost us money. Okay. So what is it that you need to hear from me in order to be able to understand the return on investment? Or what do I need to do to go and learn that language in order to be able to persuade you in a better way?
Can I add a piece as well? Because yes, as an individual, we need to be able to do that. But being an individual is also very isolating. So I think it's really important to build a network, of fellow professionals, to build a network of people that you can talk to, or kind of replenish that sense of, vocation that you have. Make sure you join associations, go to conferences when you can. You have that support system in place of people who get, what you're doing, you feel a lot less lonely. And sometimes you just reach out and say, hey, remember we were at this conference and, I've got this situation. You got any ideas? Anything that we can bounce ideas back? Because if you're the lone person in that giant organization, kind of shouting into the night, that can be hard. So do it and build a professional community, build that professional network. That makes that struggle easier to do. And I think for young people, really important to start early in developing that professional network, because you never know too. Some of these, you're planting seeds for the future that could really turn into something wonderful later.
And that's why I'm so jealous of the Future Leaders Steering Group. If that had existed when I first started, and I had a group of people who are roughly the same age, the same level of experience, and all of that we were coming together with it, like that confidence, that assurance that I knew what I was doing and I knew what I was talking about would have started so much earlier. We have 1 minute left. We haven't even touched on the mentoring and reverse mentoring platform. So thank you so much. There are a whole heap of questions. If people, please drop on the Future Leaders Steering Group online community platform if you're an IOSH member. come and talk to us on LinkedIn. Like, keep asking questions. We have a mentoring platform. We have a reverse mentoring platform. I would be completely remiss not to mention that IOSH has an accredited course called IOSH Coaching for Safety, which is a 2-day course, which is phenomenal as a little toe dip into coaching skills, specifically for safety leadership. Really, really great. There are hundreds of books out there. I'm sure Steve and I, at some point over the next couple of weeks, will put our heads together and put like our top 10 coaching books that have helped us together. But yeah, thank you so much. We will try and get to any questions that we have failed to answer. I want to say thank you so much to Steve for traveling all the way across the world in order to be this be a suitable time for him. Thank you to Jawad and his really interesting inputs. Thank you, Desma, as well. And thank you, everybody that's listened to it. Any value that you've gained today can be added as part of your CPD portfolio. There's also a whole load of stuff on Blueprint around active listening and open questions versus closed questions and all of that will give you a little taste into coaching and what it's all about. But other than that, thank you very much for everybody's time, and take care of yourselves and each other.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.